Captain Veltar stared at the scanner display with her 4 eyes wide open. Something was wrong with the readings. The energy signature floating in the empty space between stars made no sense at all. "Run the scan again," she told her crew member. "Jorik." Her voice carried the calm tone that came from 20 years of deep space exploration. Jorik's tentacles danced over the control panel. His green skin turned slightly blue, which meant he was confused. "Captain, the readings are the same. There's definitely something out there, but it's not in our database." The bridge of the Zalathi research vessel Harmony's Edge buzzed with quiet activity. The crew moved with the smooth efficiency of scientists who had worked together for many years. They were explorers, not warriors. The Zalathi had given up fighting wars thousands of years ago. "Show me the visual," Veltar ordered. The main screen flickered and showed them what their cameras could see. Against the black of space, a shape drifted silently. It was huge, much bigger than their own ship. The object looked like someone had taken metal and bent it into impossible angles. Strange patterns covered its surface, seeming to move and shift when the light hit them just right. Dr. Kesara, the team's life science expert, leaned forward in her chair. Her silver hair caught the bridge lights. "I've never seen anything like it. The design doesn't match any known species in the galactic database." "Could it be a natural formation?" asked Jorik. "Some kind of crystal growth?" Veltar shook her head. "Look at those lines. They're too perfect, too planned. Someone built this thing." She paused, studying the readings. "And it's still giving off energy. After who knows how long floating out here." The ship hung in space like a sleeping giant. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, with sections that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Along its length, rows of what might have been windows or sensors created patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Captain," called out Zeph, their navigation officer, "I'm detecting artificial gravity inside the structure. And atmosphere. Whatever this is, it's still alive in some way." Veltar felt her hearts beat faster. In all her years of exploration, she had never found anything like this. Most ancient ships they discovered were dead hulks, their crews long gone. But this one still had power, still maintained life support. "Send a message on all frequencies," she decided. Standard first contact protocols. "If anyone is aboard, they should know we're here." They waited. Minutes passed in silence. The only sound was the quiet hum of their own ship's systems. "No response, Captain," Jorik reported. "Then we go aboard." Veltar stood up from her command chair. "Kesara, Zeph, you're with me. Jorik, monitor our life signs. If something goes wrong, get us out of here." The 3 of them put on their exploration suits and loaded into the shuttle. As they flew closer to the strange ship, its true size became clear. Their entire research vessel could have fit inside one section of its hull. "Look at those markings," Kesara whispered over the comm. "They're not random. There's a pattern, like writing, but not like any language I know." They found what looked like an airlock on the ship's side. It was larger than normal, designed for beings taller than the Zalathi. When their shuttle's computer tried to interface with the ship's systems, something unexpected happened. The airlock opened on its own. "The ship's computer is talking to ours," Zeph said, his voice tight with surprise. "It's learning our language protocols fast." They docked and passed through the airlock. The moment they stepped inside, they knew they were somewhere special. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to pulse with their own light. The corridor stretched away into darkness, wider than any ship corridor should be. "Gravity is 0.9 standard," Kesara read from her scanner. "Atmosphere is breathable, though it tastes strange. There's something else, too. I'm reading organic compounds. Lots of them." They moved deeper into the ship. Emergency lighting flickered on as they walked, as if the vessel was waking up after a long sleep. The walls were thick, built to last forever. Everything about the place spoke of incredible engineering skill. These builders knew what they were doing, Veltar said. This ship could survive anything space could throw at it. They found what looked like a central corridor. It was massive, more like a street than a hallway. Doors lined both sides, each one large enough for the biggest species the Zalathi had ever met. "Captain, I'm reading life signs," Kesara said suddenly. Her scanner was beeping rapidly. "Thousands of them. They're everywhere in this ship. Moving?" Veltar asked. "No, stationary. But definitely alive." They followed the life signs deeper into the ship. The corridor opened into a chamber so large they couldn't see the far wall. Rows upon rows of figures stood in perfect formation, At first glance, they looked like statues. The figures were tall, taller than any Zalathi. They had 2 arms, 2 legs, and heads that sat on top of narrow necks. Each one wore different clothing and equipment, but all of it looked designed for one purpose: fighting. "They're in some kind of suspended animation," Kesara breathed. "The technology is incredible. I can't even begin to understand how it works." Veltar approached one of the figures. It was wearing what looked like armor, dark and practical. Tools hung from its belt, though she couldn't guess what they were for. The face was peaceful, but even in sleep there was something hard about it. "How long have they been like this?" she asked. Kesara was running her scanner over several of the figures. "Based on the energy readings and the state of their systems, I'd say thousands of years. Maybe longer. What species could build technology like this? And why are they all just standing here?" Before anyone could answer, Kesara's scanner beeped loudly. "Captain, I think I accidentally activated something." The chamber suddenly filled with a low humming sound. Lights began to flicker on throughout the vast space, and one by one the sleeping figures began to open their eyes. Veltar and her team found themselves surrounded by thousands of awakening strangers, each one reaching for weapons that weren't there, their eyes immediately scanning for threats that didn't exist. They had awakened something that had been sleeping for millennia, and none of them knew what would happen next. The first human to fully wake up was a woman with short dark hair and scars on her hands. Her eyes snapped open like someone had flipped a switch. She didn't move for several seconds, just looked around the chamber with the careful attention of someone checking for danger. Veltar and her team stood frozen. They had been exploring dead ships and empty ruins for years. None of them knew what to do when the ruins started moving. The woman's gaze found them immediately. Her hand moved to her hip, looking for a weapon that wasn't there. When she realized this, her expression changed from automatic alertness to confusion. "Stand ready," she said in a language the Zalathi had never heard. Her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the vast chamber. "Status report." More of the sleeping figures began to stir, men and women of different ages, all with the same quick, careful way of waking up. They looked around, checked their surroundings, and immediately began forming groups without anyone giving orders. "Fascinating," Dr. Kesara whispered. "Even after thousands of years of sleep, they still act like soldiers." The first woman stepped down from her platform. She was tall, much taller than the Zalathi, with broad shoulders and muscles that spoke of hard training. She moved like someone who had been in many fights and survived them all. She approached the Zalathi team slowly, her hands visible and empty. But Veltar noticed that she walked in a way that would let her change direction quickly if she needed to fight or run. "Unknown contacts," the woman said, switching to a different language. When the Zalathi didn't respond, she tried another one, then another. Each language sounded completely different from the last. "She's trying to communicate," Veltar realized. "Our universal translator is working on her speech patterns." The ship's computer systems hummed louder. Lights flickered as ancient circuits came back to life. Somewhere in the walls, massive machines began to turn. The woman stopped a few meters away from them. She studied their faces, their clothes, their equipment. Her eyes missed nothing. "I am Colonel Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Eternal Vigil," she said. This time the words came through their translators clearly. "State your identity and purpose." Veltar stepped forward carefully. "I am Captain Veltar of the Zalathi research vessel Harmony's Edge. We found your ship drifting in space. We thought it was abandoned." Colonel Chen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "How long?" "We don't know. Our scans suggest thousands of years." Around them, more humans were waking up. They moved with the same quick efficiency as their colonel. Within minutes, they had formed organized groups. Some checked the chamber's exits. Others examined equipment that had been stored near their sleeping platforms. All of them moved like they had done this many times before. "Systems check," Colonel Chen called out. Her voice carried easily across the chamber. "Report. Power at 40% and climbing," called a man with gray hair and engineer's tools on his belt. "Main systems coming online. Communications array active," reported a young woman. "Attempting contact with Fleet Command." "Fleet Command?" Veltar asked. Chen looked at her with eyes that seemed much older than her face. "The War Fleet. The other ships in our battle group." She paused. "You said thousands of years?" "At least 3,000, maybe more." Chen was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the humans continued their systematic awakening. They worked together without needing to discuss their tasks. Each person knew exactly what they were supposed to do. "Ma'am," called the communications officer. "I'm not getting any response from the fleet. Long-range sensors show nothing. Define nothing, Lieutenant. No friendly signals. No fleet formations. It's like they just disappeared." Chen nodded slowly. She turned back to the Zalathi. "Captain Veltar, I need to understand something. When you found us, were we alone?" "Yes, no other ships in this system. And in your travels, have you encountered any other vessels of our design?" Veltar shook her head. "We've never seen anything like your ship before. Your species isn't in any of our databases." The chamber filled with the sound of more platforms activating. Hundreds of humans were now awake, and the number was growing. They organized themselves into squads and work teams without any visible leadership structure. Everyone seemed to know their place. Dr. Kesara was scanning the humans with her instruments. "Captain, their biology is remarkable. Muscle density is much higher than normal for their size. Bone structure suggests adaptation to high-gravity environments. And their nervous systems, they react incredibly fast." Colonel Chen heard this. "Doctor, what species are you?" "Zalathi. We're explorers and researchers. Peaceful. Yes. We gave up warfare millennia ago." Chen looked around the chamber at her awakening crew. "Lucky you?" A young man approached them. He saluted Chen with precise military form. "Colonel, preliminary headcount shows 2,000 personnel awake in this section. Engineering estimates another 8,000 still in stasis throughout the ship." "Good. How many sections total?" 47, ma'am. Plus the manufacturing levels, training decks, and the arsenal." Veltar felt her blood grow cold. "Manufacturing levels?" Chen turned to her. "Captain, I should explain something about our ship. The Eternal Vigil isn't just a vessel, it's a mobile military base. We carry everything needed to build weapons, train soldiers, and fight wars anywhere in the galaxy." "But why? What were you fighting?" "Each other at first. Then it grew into something bigger." Chen's expression grew distant. The Long War started as a disagreement between political groups on Earth. Different ideas about how humans should live, what kind of society we should build. More platforms were activating now. The chamber echoed with the sounds of awakening humans. Each one woke up the same way, quick, alert, ready for trouble. The war spread to other planets, other systems. Chen continued. Both sides built bigger weapons, recruited new allies, developed new ways to fight. It became less about the original arguments and more about winning at any cost. "How long did it last?" Kesara asked. "When we entered stasis, it had been going for over 3,000 years. Based on what you're telling me, it might still be going." Zeph, the navigation officer, stepped closer. "Colonel, forgive me, but how can any war last that long?" Chen looked at him with something that might have been pity. "You adapt. You build ships like this one that can fight forever. You train children to be soldiers before they can walk. You turn war into a way of life instead of just a temporary conflict." The humming of the ship's systems grew louder. Lights came on in sections they hadn't seen before. The Eternal Vigil was waking up after its long sleep, and with it, 10,000 human warriors who had been bred for one purpose. "Captain Veltar," Chen said formally, "I need to ask you something important. Are there other species out here? Other civilizations?" "Yes, many of them. We're part of a galactic community of peaceful worlds." Chen nodded slowly. Then she looked around at her awakening crew, each one a product of millennia of warfare. "Then we have a problem." 2 hours after the first awakening, Colonel Chen led the Zalathi team through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The ship was coming alive around them. Lights flickered on as they walked. Ventilation systems hummed to life. In the distance, they could hear the sound of heavy machinery starting up. "Your ship is enormous," Veltar said as they walked. "How many people lived here?" 50,000 when we entered stasis, Chen replied. The Eternal Vigil was designed to operate independently for centuries. Maybe longer. They passed groups of humans who were checking equipment and running diagnostics on systems that had been sleeping for millennia. Each group they met saluted Chen with crisp military precision. Everyone knew their job and did it without question. "Colonel," Dr. Kesara asked, "how did your people develop such discipline?" Chen stopped walking. She looked at the doctor with an expression that was hard to read. "Doctor, when you're born into a war that has been going on for longer than anyone can remember, Discipline isn't something you learn. It's something you are. They entered what Chen called the command center. It was a vast room filled with screens and control stations. Humans worked at every station, their fingers dancing over controls that looked more complex than anything the Zalathi had ever seen. Status report. Chen called out as they entered. All primary systems online, reported a woman with lieutenant stripes. Long-range sensors are active. We're scanning for fleet signatures. Any contacts? Negative, ma'am. No human ships detected within our scanning range. Chen moved to a large display that showed star charts. The patterns meant nothing to the Zalathi, but Chen studied them like she was reading a book. This is wrong, she said quietly. We should be detecting something. Battle formations, supply convoys, patrol routes. The war was everywhere when we went into stasis. Veltar approached the display. Colonel, could the war have ended? Chen turned to look at her. For the first time, the human's controlled expression cracked slightly. Captain, I don't think you understand. The Long War wasn't the kind of conflict that just ends. It had become the central fact of human existence. She touched controls on the display. New images appeared, records from the ship's memory banks. The Zalathi watched in growing horror as they saw what human civilization had become. The images showed planets turned into fortress worlds, space stations that were really massive weapon platforms, ships like the Eternal Vigil engaged in battles that lasted for months, entire solar systems devoted to nothing but building weapons and training soldiers. This is what we were fighting, Chen explained. Not just enemy armies, but an entire way of life built around war. Both sides had grown so large, so complex that stopping would have meant the collapse of everything we knew. Dr. Kessera stared at the images. How many people died? Billions. Maybe trillions. We stopped counting after the first 1,000 years. The lieutenant at the communication station looked up. Colonel, I'm picking up something strange. These aren't human signals, but they're definitely artificial. Organized, like a communications network. Chen looked at the Zalathi. Your people? Possibly, Veltar said. We're part of a galactic communication system. Hundreds of worlds stay in contact through it. Hundreds of worlds? Chen's voice was sharp. All peaceful? Yes, we trade, share knowledge, explore together. We've had peace for over 10,000 years. Chen was quiet for a long moment. She studied the Zalathi faces, then looked around at her own crew. Every human in the command center was listening to the conversation now. Lieutenant Morrison, Chen called to the communications officer. Can you break down those signals? I want to know how many different sources we're dealing with. Working on it, ma'am. Morrison's fingers flew over her controls. I'm detecting at least 30 different signal types. Maybe more. They're all using different languages and protocols, but they're talking to each other. Chen walked to another display. This one showed the ship's internal systems. Veltar could see sections marked as workshops, training areas, and something labeled Arsenal Level 115. 15 levels of weapons? Seth asked. The Eternal Vigil carries everything from personal firearms to planet-killing devices, Chen said matter-of-factly. We were built to fight any kind of enemy under any conditions. She touched more controls. New sections of the ship appeared on the display. Vast manufacturing areas, laboratories, training facilities that looked like they could simulate any kind of battlefield. Colonel, called another officer, we're getting partial awakening in the civilian sections. The families are starting to come out of stasis. Families? Veltar asked. Children mostly, Chen explained. The non-combat population. They've been in deeper stasis than the military personnel. Dr. Kessera looked shocked. You had children on a warship? Doctor, by the time we launched, there was nowhere else for them to be. Every human world was a target. Every station was a military outpost. The only safe place for human children was on a ship that could defend itself. The communications officer looked up again. Colonel, I'm detecting something else. Energy signatures that match our own technology. Very faint, very distant, but definitely human. Chen moved to Morrison Station quickly. Show me. The main display changed to show a long-range sensor reading. Points of light appeared scattered across a vast area of space. Those are human ships, Chen said. Still active. Still moving, she paused. Still fighting. The command center fell silent except for the hum of electronics. Every human in the room was staring at the display. After 3,000 years, the war is still going, Chen said quietly. And now we have to decide what to do about it. She turned to face the Zalathi fully. Captain Veltar, I need you to understand something. My people are the product of endless war. We're very good at it. We've spent millennia learning how to fight anyone, anywhere, with any weapons we can build. Veltar felt cold despite the ship's warmth. What are you saying? I'm saying that right now you're standing on the most dangerous military platform ever built by any species. And you've just told us that there are hundreds of peaceful worlds out there with no real defenses. Chen looked around at her crew, then back at the Zalathi. The question is, what do we do with that information? The silence stretched on. On the displays around them, human children were beginning to wake up in distant sections of the ship. But in the command center, trained warriors waited for their colonel to make a decision that could change the fate of the galaxy. There's something else you need to know, Chen said finally. We're not the only ship like this. When we went into stasis, there were dozens of vessels in our class. Mobile fortress factories, each one carrying tens of thousands of soldiers and the ability to build armies anywhere they went. She pointed at the energy signatures on the display. Some of those signals might be our sister ships. And if they're still active after all this time, if they're still fighting the Long War. Chen didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The Zalathi could see the implications clearly enough. They had awakened humanity's warriors. And now those warriors had to choose between returning to an ancient war or bringing that war to a peaceful galaxy that had never known such violence. Colonel, Veltar said carefully, what do your people want? Chen looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. Captain, I'm not sure my people remember how to want anything except victory. Colonel Chen led them deeper into the ship, past sections that made the Zalathi's mind struggle to understand what they were seeing. They passed workshops where machines automatically built weapons from raw materials. They saw training rooms where holographic enemies died again and again, while computer systems analyzed the best ways to kill them. This is level 7, Chen said as they walked through a corridor lined with weapon storage. Personal firearms, mostly. We keep the bigger stuff on the lower levels. Dr. Kesara stopped in front of a display case containing what looked like a simple rifle. According to the label, it could fire projectiles that would punch through 3 meters of solid steel. This is a basic infantry weapon? She asked. Standard issue for new recruits, Chen confirmed. We start training with these when children turn 8 years old. 8? Veltar's voice was barely a whisper. By the time I was 12, I could field strip and reassemble that rifle blindfolded in under 30 seconds, Chen said. By 15, I had my first confirmed kills in battle. They continued walking. The next section contained tactical computers that could plan battles involving millions of soldiers across entire star systems. The displays showed attack patterns that could break any known defense, strategies for conquering worlds that had never seen war. Your people really thought of everything, Zeph said. We had to, Chen replied. The enemy was just as smart as we were, just as determined. Every time we developed a new weapon, they found a counter for it. Every time they created a new defense, we found a way to break it. They passed a group of human children who had recently awakened. The oldest couldn't have been more than 16, but they moved with the same alert wariness as the adult soldiers. When they saw Colonel Chen, they snapped to attention automatically. At ease, Chen told them. The children relaxed slightly, but their eyes continued to scan the corridors for threats. They're so young, Dr. Kesara said after the children had passed. Young by your standards, maybe. But those kids have been training for war since they could walk. Give them weapons and they'll fight as effectively as any adult soldier. Chen led them to an observation deck that looked out over one of the ship's manufacturing levels. The space was enormous, filled with assembly lines and robotic systems. Even after thousands of years of inactivity, the machines were coming back to life. What are they building? Veltar asked. Everything we need to continue the war, Chen said. Weapons, ammunition, equipment, even more robots to help with production. This ship can build a complete army from raw materials in about 6 months. On the manufacturing floor below, humans worked alongside machines that could reshape matter at the molecular level. They were building things the Zalathi had never imagined. Weapons that could destroy ships from inside, armor that could make soldiers nearly invulnerable, devices that could turn an enemy's own equipment against them. Colonel, how did your species become so advanced at warfare? Dr. Kesara asked. Chen was quiet for a moment. Doctor, imagine if your entire civilization spent 3,000 years focused on one problem. How to destroy your enemies more effectively than they can destroy you. Every scientist, every engineer, every creative mind working on variations of the same basic question. She pointed to a section where technicians were working on something that looked like a small metal sphere. That device can collapse the quantum structure of matter within a 50-kilometer radius. We developed it in year 2047 of the war. The enemy had it figured out and countered within 6 months. And then we built something worse. They moved to another level. This one contained what Chen called the strategic archive, computers that held the complete military history of humanity's long war. Every battle, every tactic, every successful strategy was recorded here. A technician was reviewing battle records on a massive display. The Zalathi watched as computer simulations showed them how humans had learned to fight in every possible environment. In space, on planets inside stars, even in dimensions that existed only in mathematics. We fought in places your people probably don't know exist, Chen said. Battles unfolded space-time, conflicts that lasted subjective centuries but only took minutes in normal time. We learned to kill enemies we couldn't see, touch, or even understand. The displays showed weapon systems that could reach across galactic distances, battle tactics that involved manipulating the laws of physics themselves, strategies for warfare that treated entire species as expendable resources. There, Chen pointed to one section of the display, the Battle of Kepler Station. We held that position for 800 years against an enemy force that outnumbered us 50-1. How? We turned the station itself into a weapon. Every corridor became a death trap. Every room was designed to kill anyone who wasn't human. We trained children to operate the defense systems because adults were too big to fit in some of the weapon placements. Dr. Kesara looked sick. Colonel, with respect, how did your people retain any humanity at all? Chen turned to look at her. For the first time, her controlled expression showed something that might have been pain. That's a fair question, Doctor. I'm not sure we did. They continued their tour. In the medical sections, they found facilities designed to keep soldiers fighting even after injuries that should have killed them. In the education centers, they saw classrooms where human children learned mathematics by calculating artillery trajectories and studied history by analyzing successful military campaigns. Everything here serves the war effort, Chen explained. Art, music, literature, they all became tools for maintaining morale and unit cohesion. Even our entertainment was designed to keep people focused on the mission. In one section, they found something that made Veltar step backward in shock. Tanks filled with growing tissue, machines that could build new human soldiers from genetic templates. We ran out of volunteers around year 2000, Chen said simply. After that, we had to get creative about maintaining our numbers. You grew people just to send them to war? The enemy was doing the same thing. We couldn't afford to fall behind in any area, including population. The tour continued through levels that contained psychological warfare equipment, weapons that could break enemy minds without touching their bodies. They saw torture devices designed to extract information from any known species. They found strategic planning computers that could predict the behavior of entire civilizations and plan their destruction. Colonel, Veltar said finally, I have to ask, in all this time, in all these battles, did your people ever try to make peace? Chen stopped walking. Around them, the ship hummed with the activity of awakening warriors and reactivating weapon systems. Several times, she said. Treaties were signed. Ceasefires were declared. But the war had become bigger than any government or leader. It had its own momentum. What do you mean? Captain, imagine an economy built entirely around producing weapons. Imagine billions of people whose only job skills involve fighting and killing. Imagine children who have never known anything except preparation for battle. How do you stop something like that? Chen looked around at the weapon displays surrounding them. The war became self-sustaining. It didn't matter what the politicians wanted or what the original causes were. Too many people depended on the conflict continuing. Too much of our civilization was built around it. She turned back to the Zalathi. And now we're awake. 10,000 warriors on a ship that can build armies and weapons unlike anything your peaceful galaxy has ever seen. In the distance, alarms began to sound. Not emergency signals, but the organized alerts of a military vessel preparing for operations. What's happening? Veltar asked. Chen's expression hardened back into military focus. Long-range sensors have found something. We're being called to the command center. As they hurried through the corridors, past awakening soldiers and humming weapon systems, Veltar realized that her simple exploration mission had uncovered something terrible. She had found humanity's warriors. And now they were awake, armed, and facing a decision that would determine the fate of every peaceful world in the galaxy. The command center was full of activity when they arrived. Officers moved between stations with urgent purpose. The main display showed star charts covered in new information, energy signatures, movement patterns, and threat assessments that made the room feel charged with tension. "Report, Colonel," Chen ordered as she took her position at the central command station. Lieutenant Morrison looked up from her communications panel. "Colonel, we've established contact with long-range sensor networks. The readings are significant. Show me." The main display changed to show a three-dimensional map of local space. Hundreds of points of light appeared, scattered across thousands of star systems. Red indicators marked active conflict zones. Yellow showed areas under military control. Green represented the few remaining neutral territories. "The long war is still active," Morrison continued, "but it's spread far beyond our original theater of operations. Based on these readings, human forces now control over 40% of this galactic sector." Dr. Kesara stared at the display. "That's impossible. The peaceful worlds we know about aren't marked here at all." "They wouldn't be," Chen said grimly. "Our sensors are designed to detect military assets and strategic resources. If your worlds don't have significant defenses or weapons production, they wouldn't register as important." Another officer called out from across the room. "Colonel, we're receiving communication attempts on old fleet frequencies. Multiple sources. Put them through." The speakers crackled with static, then voices began to emerge. Human voices speaking in military codes that were thousands of years old but still apparently in use. Battle Group 7 reporting successful pacification of Sector 445, requesting resupply convoy for extended siege operations. New alien species encountered in Grid 7742, resistance minimal. Integration proceeding. Chen listened to the reports with growing alarm. Each transmission painted a picture of a war that had grown beyond anything she remembered. Human forces were fighting battles across half the galaxy, conquering worlds and absorbing entire civilizations into their military structure. "How many ships are out there?" she asked. "At least 300 large vessels, Colonel. Probably more. And based on these communications, they've been recruiting non-human populations into their armies." Veltar felt her blood turn cold. "Recruiting? It's standard procedure," Chen explained. "When you conquer a world, you evaluate its population for military usefulness. Those who can fight join the war effort. Those who can't—" She didn't finish the sentence. The communications continued. Reports of battles that had lasted decades. Entire star systems converted into weapon manufacturing centers. Plans for campaigns that would take centuries to complete. "Colonel," called another officer, "we're being directly contacted. Fleet Command is demanding our status and current orders." Chen was quiet for a long moment. Around her, the command center waited for her decision. The Zalathi team stood to one side, watching the humans prepare to rejoin a war that had consumed half the galaxy. "What are our options?" Chen asked her staff. "We can rejoin the fleet," her executive officer replied. "Our manufacturing capabilities would be extremely valuable. We could be producing new weapons and training fresh soldiers within weeks. Or we could go independent, use our resources to carve out our own territory. With our firepower and manufacturing base, we could probably establish control over several systems." Chen looked at the star chart. Then she turned to face the Zalathi directly. "Captain Veltar, I need to know something. These peaceful worlds you mentioned, how many people live on them?" "Billions, maybe trillions across all the member species. And they've really never fought wars? Not for thousands of years. We've had no need for military forces." Chen nodded slowly. She looked around at her officers, then back at the display showing the ongoing human war. "There's a third option," she said finally. "Something we've never tried before." The command center fell silent. "We could end it," Chen continued. "Use our capabilities not to continue the war, but to stop it permanently." Her executive officer stepped forward. "Colonel, with respect, that's impossible. The war is too big, too widespread. It involves too many worlds and too many people. Maybe. But we have something the other fleets don't, perspective. We've been asleep for 3,000 years. We can see how far this has gone, how much it's cost." Chen moved to the main display and touched the controls. The star chart zoomed out, showing the full scope of human military expansion. Look at this. We've turned half the galaxy into a battlefield. We've conquered hundreds of worlds and absorbed dozens of species into our war machine. And for what? None of us even remember what we were originally fighting about. Lieutenant Morrison looked up from her station. Colonel, incoming priority transmission from Fleet Command. They're ordering us to report to Sector Command for immediate deployment. Delay response, Chen ordered. Tell them we're still running system diagnostics. She turned back to the Zalathi. Captain, if we were to help your people, what would you need? Feltar's hearts were beating so fast she could barely speak. Help us how? Protect you. Share technology for defense systems. Maybe help establish some kind of neutral zone where species can exist without being drawn into our war. You would do that? Chen was quiet for a moment. She looked around at her crew, soldiers who had been trained from birth to fight and conquer. I don't know, she said honestly. My people have been warriors for so long, I'm not sure we know how to be anything else. But maybe it's time to try. Her executive officer stepped closer. Colonel, if we defy Fleet Command, we'll be declared rogue. They'll send other ships to bring us back into line. I know. And if we try to establish some kind of protected zone, we'll be at war with our own species. I know that too. Chen looked back at the star chart. The red indicators seemed to pulse with the light of distant battles, conflicts that had been going on for longer than most civilizations had existed. But Lieutenant, look at what we've become. We've spent 3,000 years perfecting the art of destruction. We've turned war into our only culture, violence into our only language. She gestured toward the Zalathi. These people have built something we never managed, a peaceful civilization that spans hundreds of worlds. Maybe it's time we learned from them instead of conquering them. The command center was completely silent now. Every human in the room was staring at their colonel, processing the idea of turning against everything they had been taught since birth. Colonel, Morrison said quietly. What are your orders? Chen studied the faces around her. Soldiers who had never known peace. Warriors who had been bred for conflict, people whose entire identity was built around fighting and winning. Send a message to Fleet Command, she said finally. Tell them the Eternal Vigil is claiming independent status. We're withdrawing from active operations to pursue alternative objectives. And if they send ships to stop us? Chen's expression hardened into something that reminded everyone in the room why she had survived thousands of years of warfare. Then we remind them why the ship was built to fight alone against impossible odds. She turned to face the Zalathi one last. Captain Veltar, I'm offering you a choice. You can return to your ship and warn your people about what's coming. Tell them that human expansion will reach their worlds eventually, and they should prepare for war. Chen paused. Or you can stay and help us try something that's never been done before. Help us learn how to be something other than warriors. Help us find a way to stop this war before it destroys everything in the galaxy. Veltar looked at her team, then back at the humans surrounding them. 10,000 soldiers on a ship built for endless war, facing the choice between continuing an ancient conflict or trying to forge something completely new. Outside the ship, the stars themselves seemed to flicker with the distant light of battles that had raged for millennia, and in the command center of the Eternal Vigil, two species stood at a crossroads that would determine the fate of countless worlds. The choice was made. Now they would have to live with the consequences. In the distance, alarms began to sound as Fleet Command ships changed course toward their position. The first test of their new alliance was already beginning.